Welcome everybody here and in our Zoom audience. I'm Michael Schachter, President of the Carolina Nature Coalition. Our mission is to raise public awareness of environmental and environmental justice issues and to engage citizens in meaningful community action. And this presentation will surely meet our mission. I would like to thank a few people while we're here. I would like to thank the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship for providing us a place to meet. I would like to thank Tom Shoup for being our technical advisor and also our secretary for the Carolina Nature Coalition. Connie Casey for being our communications director and providing our food over there. Thank you. And I'd like to thank Ed Toth for providing us our speaker. So I'm going to give you Ed Toth to present our presenter.
Thank you, Michael. I'm very pleased, very honored that we have Karen Clark with us tonight. Karen is with the North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission, which is conducting several projects that rely on public volunteers for their implementation. I like to say, citizen scientists, but it is the volunteers that can really help provide a lot of good scientific data, much more than with just staff out with hours compared to the limited staff hours that are available to Karen. Karen, or KC as she likes to be called, she's worked with the Resources Commission for 17 years. Prior to her current position, she was director of the Outer Banks Center for Wildlife Education in Corolla, North Carolina. And a year ago, she took up a new position with WRC to support the agency's wildlife diversity community's scientific efforts up and down. I mean, that's amazing, up and down the entire coast of North Carolina. So this one person is handling all this. And rather than try to explain the program, which I can't do, I will let KC do it for us. Thank you, KC.
All right, well, thank you so much for having me here tonight. And let me assure you, I'm not alone, okay? There are a lot of people who are making a lot of this effort and a lot of people who end up being folks just like yourselves, who are really doing the bulk of the conservation efforts that our agency is a part of. So certainly, I know that we are doing a little bit of hybrid. So we have a Zoom audience and we have our live audience here. I do sometimes better if you feel free to ask questions along on the way, but we'll also have some opportunities at the end to take some questions as well. So just a little bit of background, just to make sure that everybody has kind of a similar foundation. Just thought I would give some ideas about what the concept when we're talking about citizen science, and it's kind of going through a little bit of a rebranding phase as well. So you might hear community science. In other words, trying to make it kind of understood that it's that group effort. But there's a lot of different variations and different projects that you might find that identify themselves as community or citizen science. But the bottom line is it's always going to be a collaboration between basically scientists and volunteers. And there should be some sort of effort to increase the scientific knowledge. And at the same time, it's going to provide access or exposure to of this scientific information to the community. So it really is a partnership on both sides. So it incorporates both of those areas. And it can be used to basically answer any kind of a research question or just to inform natural resource management decisions, which makes a lot of sense in why this is such a good tool for our agency, being a management agency. Using volunteers is a really great way to kind of expand our effort. So when you're thinking about citizen science, you're going to have basically, remember, we've got professionals, we have non-professionals, right, the general public that are being involved. And then we also have the professional scientists. And the results really should bring about some sort of meaningful data that is applied to real life issues. Okay. So when people are talking about citizen science, this is basically what they mean. But you can't forget that it also, on the flip side, has a very clearly defined education component as well. So that's where both sides of the audience tend to gain from this. So you'll see researchers use this in a variety of different ways. A lot of times just like a one-time biological inventory of the area. So if you've ever heard of a BioBlitz before, that's one of the a great way to be able to use these efforts. And then also just sort of establishing baseline environmental data. So sometimes researchers who have a more in-depth question might use citizen scientists to gather preliminary data to then decide where further exploration should be done. And it can also be a very useful tool in filling in different kind of gaps, right? So if you just think, geographically, quantitatively, your sample sizes can increase. Time-wise, you can just do so much more when you have when you're using the citizens, involved in that. You think about like, master students and PhD students even, like they have this kind of short-term window that they're looking at things. But when you have the community engaged in this long-term monitoring, it brings out a whole different kind of picture sometimes of what is going on in the entire system. So, so these are great meaningful ways that community science can be used. And it's done with, pooled resources. And what I like best about it too, is that it's using people who actually a lot of times are involved and engaged in the environments in which is being researched. And so they have a lot to gain from what is being learned from that. And then the researchers also have a lot to gain from the experience of those volunteers. So I just think that it's a really great place to, a really meaningful way to kind of go about some research, and often what results is just this fostered sense of place and kind of caring amongst all the participants, where researchers might care a little bit even more on the social side of aspects coming at them, and then the public can also then kind of appreciate the scientific value that is brought. So just kind of curious of amongst the groups, how many of you would self-identify of participating in some sort of community science project previously? I would imagine this group has a room full, right? Are you guys, what different types of programs, if you don't mind throwing them out for a bit? Terrapin Tally, okay, great, okay. Well, I'll talk a little bit about that one tonight, but maybe you can talk more about it. What else? Oh, yeah. There's a lot of different Shark ID, or a couple different Shark ID programs out there. That's great. Kind of crowdsourcing that. What's that? The long sharks? Yeah. Trees. Oh, sure. There's some bud burst and some other kind of programs too. Yeah. So how about iNaturalist? Any familiarity with that amongst the group? Any users? Do you guys know what iNaturalist is? A little bit? Okay. So this is kind of the way, that some folks, and it does tend to pull some, different folks into their programs, but like iNaturalist is really a way that people can just kind of take a look at things and submit observations, and you can do it on your own time. You can do it. You can hook up into different projects that are listed, but it's a great way that then researchers can actually go. They will qualify the observations into research grade. So basically, you submit a photo and a location, which is done just through the phone, right? It'll tag that, and it'll let folks know, that you have a black widow spider, on there, and you can try to do an identification, or even if you can't ID it, you can just put it out there. And so a lot of people like to use this for this, and then other professionals will come in and take a look who might have interest in those, and they'll say, oh yeah, that's definitely a black widow, and you get 3 people saying it's a black widow, and it becomes research grade. And you can actually get some biologists and other researchers who will tap into the data that comes from iNaturalist to be able to get kind of a broader picture of what's going on in greater areas. eBird, how many are familiar with eBird, or if Yep, a little bit, yeah. So eBird is probably, I think, been around even longer than iNaturalist, but it's a very similar program, and it also helps to helps people in making some identifications. But there's all sorts of different kind of tools out there, like Herp Mapper, that one specific for reptiles and amphibians, and there's dragonflies, birds. You can find just about anything that you want now to, you know, to be able to get involved with. And there's different types of apps, and, you know, like your field guides are now available on, you know, on phones as well. That's that a lot of folks will work, but there's nothing quite like just getting out into nature as well and taking a look and immersing yourself to identify these. But these are some different types of tools that exist. So if citizen science, I'm going to talk basically about what we do with the commission, but if that doesn't quite fit your interest, I just want to throw it out that there's just basically a whole lot more of resources out there. And I actually put this together for another presentation, but you're welcome to take a look at it. And I just have it listed by different kind of categories and some opportunities to get involved in some different citizen science. So now I'm just going to kind of talk to you a little bit about the Wildlife Resources Commission and the different kind of projects that they're involved with, and then specifically the programs that I've been linked with up and down the coast. And just in general, I just wanted to kind of bring out is that, you know, like citizen science has been a term that's been around now for quite a couple decades, you know, going on just about, but it really has come up, you know, a little bit more recently, but organizations have been relying essentially on citizens to help contribute to monitoring and to getting data for a long time. And we know that in just the agencies like hunter and trapper cooperation programs where they'll use hunters who are sitting in deer stands and making observations. Just, you know, they're waiting for, you know, for their game to come by. But while they're doing that, they've been contributing other kind of observations that some of our biologists have wanted to know about. So different kind of sightings along on the way. And then deer hunters even, you know, contributing things like the jaw bones, which have helped with aging studies, and bear teeth, same sort of thing. So there's all sorts of different collections that our hunters have been contributing with for a while, and now even in monitoring, you know, disease monitoring. So feathers for analyzing different kind of diseases, and CWD now, which has unfortunately hit our state. But it just kind of goes to show you that it's been definitely to the core of the agency for, you know, for a while. And our diversity biologists have been intrigued as well in kind of essentially kind of crowdsourcing, you know, identifications and, or even, you know, sightings of different animals. And the last I checked, even, you know, on our site, so there's requests basically if people find alligators or bat roosts, barn owls. There's even a great program that if private landowners have identified barn owls, that the commission has offered to come out and put up a house for them. In return for being able to kind of monitor and see that, to continue to learn a little bit more of those. But the list goes on in different kind of things that that you could get involved with, and all it is just submitting observations that you know that you have seen. So I'm going to switch to just kind of the programs that I've been a little bit more affiliated with. So I work with some of our bird biologists. And, you know, again, there's different ways that you can contribute. And even our bird biologists, they tap into some of the eBird sightings. So just by using that app is a great way that some of our biologists gain some information. And there's a lot of different types of programs. In fact, a lot of the citizen science programming started off in the birding community. So you'll see a diverse array of different kind of programs to be involved with. The ones that I wanted to talk to you tonight that have some kind of local connection that maybe you might want to be involved with, but our water bird biologist actually lives here in New Bern, and she does a lot of really good work and uses volunteers, again, kind of up and down the coast. But I'm going to kind of highlight the program areas that I think that she uses most volunteers with. But and the seasonality of it is so basically in the spring, and then we have some continued monitoring through the summer and the fall. But spring and fall, you guys know why they're focusing on those times? Migrations, yeah. So we have a group called the Beach Bird Stewards of Emerald Isle. So if you guys have not heard of that one, that's a nice one that's down down the road just a little ways. And there is a part of the beach that is posted during the nesting season to allow for some least tern nesting, mostly some Wilson's plovers as well. And so that's kind of a protected area. And so we use volunteers for those who like to do the birding to be able to do bird counts, but also for folks who just like to be within the environment and to let folks know why the posting is up and why the birds might be acting a little aggressively, and to give them some space, while they're out there. So that's a program that is nearby in the area. And then international shorebird surveys. So those are ones that can be done pretty much anywhere along on the coast that we can, talk a little bit more about. And those, again, kind of that focuses in the migration time. So in the fall and in the spring. We do post some habitats, again, just like we did on Emerald Isle. And so we'll use volunteers sometimes for just getting out onto some of these islands that are out in the sound system, and put up signs and some line just so that folks know that it's nesting season, and to give the birds some space there. And in the fall, our biologist likes to take out groups to just simply clean up the habitats as well. I mentioned the Beach Bird Stewards of Emerald Isle. And then every 3 years, we do a colonial waterbird nesting survey. So that's what you see, the beautiful egret, right? The face only a mom could love. Although it does look fuzzy and furry, and people like that, right? But we actually do nest counts and try to get some population estimates and some on various islands and in different locations for those. And so we've used volunteers with that in the past, and we're happy to be returning to that. Again, this year we had to skip 3 years ago for various reasons. And then other kind of, which we know, and then other special kind of projects. So we've used volunteers sometimes when we've had special permits for doing some banding of different birds and some satellite tagging and things like that. So if that is something of interest, then we can definitely get your name and contact information and send out those opportunities as they come, as they come about. The Bird Atlas, has anybody heard about this program? Okay, so this is a 5-year program that the Commission has launched this last year. And so it's basically 1 year into the 5 years. And the goal is looking at this map. And these are what are called priority blocks, but basically getting 20 hours of observation in each of these priority blocks. Although, quite frankly, you can bird from anywhere and just hook up into the eBird app and connect to the program, and that goes into the data for this. But what's really neat about this is it's not only just looking for when and where birds are being seen, which you would put in, in the identification of them, but it's also kind of looking just a little bit into like slowing down and taking time and observing some behaviors with it. And I really like that, about the program. And so these sightings and the behavior notes can be put into this portal onto eBird, and then it's shared with our biologists. And this can be done. There's, anyone from a beginner to an advanced birder has ways to contribute to this. And so you can, we do offer different workshops on the Bird Atlas, so you could attend and kind of see where your fit would be in there. But you can also shadow along with other birders in the process. So herps, which is our affectionate name, right, for reptiles and amphibians. So Herp Mapper is another, just one of these kind of online programs, as well as the Carolina Herp Atlas. Those are just places that people can contribute their sightings of any kind of herps that reptiles or amphibians that our biologists then get access to. So if you are a naturalist who just likes going out and looking and recording those, our biologist really for herps recommends the Herp Mapper. He definitely gets the information with that. Box Turtle Connection is another program that is run statewide. And that's connected a lot in the state parks. So if that's something of interest, then we could find a park or a place nearby that is doing that program. But they tend to go out. Some of them will do the radio telemetry, which you see the girls doing in the top photo, looking for the box turtles. And other times, some of the turtles have it's just making observations of turtles as they've been seen, and and then looking along on the margins to see if there's any notches, because they've been notched to identify them individually at these different sites. So the program that I was going to highlight tonight is called the Calling Amphibian Survey Program. So that's frog calls, okay? And this program takes basically January through May. There's 3 different survey windows that we have. So, and pretty much January through May, with a few weeks off in between here and there on those. And what volunteers end up doing with this, it's a statewide program, but I put up the picture. So we've got New Bern right there in the center, but you can see some of the routes that are nearby. And these are driving routes. So what volunteers do is they basically will drive, it's about a 10 to 15 mile ride, and they essentially drive for about a mile. The stops are predefined, but you would drive a mile, you'd stop, and you listen for 5 minutes, and you record all the frog species that you hear. And then you would drive another about a mile, stop, and listen for 5 minutes. And these acoustic surveys, we have trainings for those. So those are some of the programs that I lead. So if that's something of interest, then you can sign up. And next time I do a workshop, and I've been doing them both online and, some in person. And if you guys want, I've got a sneak peek of that too today, because I think of this as just a really good kind of party trick too, to be able to identify the frog calls. So we'll listen to a few before we leave. And we're also looking at trying to expand this. So Frog Watch USA is a program that was run through AZA, and we're looking to either tap into that or maybe replicate that. And the difference between that and these mobile surveys is that basically you can frog from your backyard, where any place that you're hearing a lot of frogs, you can just identify a spot and be able to contribute your observations from those sites. So that's kind of the good kind of jumping point for folks into the program. And then as you get more engaged with it and comfortable with listening to frog calls, then trying to pick up one of these driving routes is probably the next step with that. Terrapin Tally is another one that is a great one, because there's a lot of locations along on the coast, and that's looking at the diamondback terrapins. And so the trainings typically are in April, and then data collection ranges basically from the end of April to mid-May, typically over weekends. And volunteers, what they typically will do is volunteer for 1 or 2 days. But what they're doing is they're going out in their kayaks, and they're basically looking for these guys, their heads to pop up at the surface and getting a count on them then. And so it's a head count, and it's designed to try to understand the population within the the brackish waters here, because that is a specialized species, and it's a species of concern in North Carolina. So you can see where the different types of routes currently are. I think that we are going to expand up closer to my neck of the woods. We're going to probably do something off of Ocracoke or Hatteras as well, but these other routes should be staying into the rotation too. We have a similar survey with bats called NABAT. So it's an acoustic survey. We've also done roost emergence counts, and then, I mentioned that our biologist was interested in hearing if people have roosts, or if you know of any well-established bat houses that have a lot of bats in there. We'd like to get emergence counts out of those, so you can let us know with that, and we can set some observations up there. But the North Carolina, the North American bat monitoring program, we've specialized that within North Carolina. These are the different areas that we have routes. And what's really neat about this one is that the skill set is that you can drive, and you can drive slow. Like if that's what you can contribute, then that's fantastic, because with this one, you end up putting the microphone on the top of the car, and it feeds into a tablet. And so it's a kit that we just hand off to folks, and it gets transferred. And you literally, with a partner, somebody drives, the other one's holding the tablet, and it will pick up and record the calls along on the way. And the really neat part about this equipment now is that it'll give you an initial identification of what the software thinks that it's hearing. So a lot of times you'll get, a good number of good IDs, but you get that instant kind of feedback of what you're hearing while you're out there. And then we end up analyzing those recordings and verifying them and getting them into the database. But so it's a fun one that that a lot of people can get involved with. The way this one works is that, again, we do trainings in the spring, and then there's all these different routes. They have basically throughout June and July, they're each assigned one 9-day window. So the commitment really turns out to be basically there's 9 days that you are looking to get out to do the route, and it's only 2 nights that you'd go out within that 9-day window. But accounting for weather, we have to give, some good amount of time to try to make sure that people can squeeze that in. And we're looking to try to expand that. I mentioned another one just because I always like a good acronym that I was calling BAT Camp. And so that is the Coastal Acoustic Monitoring Program, because there's a lot of interest in bats, especially along on the coast. For one, our baseline data, a lot of the previous research, most of it was done in the mountains, and we don't have as much information about what's happening to bats here along on the coast. And so we're looking to expand that. And not only that, but white nose syndrome, you may be familiar with, but it absolutely has just decimated the populations. But we think that what happens along on the coast is that they are less susceptible to it. And so the survival of some of these species might be relying on what populations we have along here on the coast. And so being able to capture and quantify what it is that we have and seeing in this area might be really good observations for our biologists. So I'm looking to try to basically take some of this equipment that we use during the summer months and maybe doing some wintertime surveying along on the coast. So if you know of areas that that you see bats, occasionally, I was going to say frequently, but I mean, we're talking about in the winter months. And the idea is that what a lot of times will happen is that it'll be cold. And then, when you look at the forecast and you see like a warm day in there, that's the time to go out and say, hey, are there any bats flying around? And this is why we think that they can survive the white nose syndrome as well, is that instead of just hunkering down for the entire winter, they are occasionally awaking, coming out and doing some more foraging. So they have the reserves, the nutritional reserves to last the winter and not succumb to that, to the white nose syndrome that comes about. So what we'd like to do is keep an eye out on the forecast. So it's something that we can't plan entirely ahead for, but when you start seeing the 10-day forecast and getting into 5 days and you're like, well, it's going to get warm. That's the time where we're like, okay, let's find a place that we go out and just monitor and see what we can pick up. So I think that that's something that I'm looking forward to trying to identify. So if you, spend the winter and if you find some places that would be a good place to run the equipment, let me know and we can give it a go. Mm-hmm.
So basically with the bat, I did a lot of bat monitoring in my life. So basically you're looking at presence absence, you're not trying to get some idea of population numbers.
There is, so with the June, July surveys, there is a little bit of population modeling going on because any bat is actually a continent-wide program. Excuse me. So it's Canada, the United States and Central America. And the idea is that most of the monitoring takes place during the breeding season, right? So the maternity season, so that migrants are, so that they're still, so that hopefully that you can use that as an estimate. And there's a lot of kind of structure and assumptions built into the model to make sure that they can then put that into a population estimate, number. So there is some population estimates with that one. Most folks, I'm sorry, I meant to put some more photos on here, but the Sea Turtle Project, which is probably where I've spent most of my previous experience with, I've gotten to add a lot of these other programs, which has been a lot of fun, but most of my knowledge actually lies with volunteers with the Sea Turtle Program. And, we use volunteers basically for nesting response. So monitoring the beaches, looking for sea turtles nesting, and then monitoring those nests during the season, doing stranding response. We have multiple rehab facilities in the state that people can get involved with. So I'm sure you're probably mostly familiar with Topsail, but the aquariums have some rehab potential as well, where they use some volunteers. And then cold stuns is kind of the season that we're moving into right now, which is a type of stranding, but it's a specialized stranding. And that happens mostly in Pamlico Sound. And, so basically Hatteras Island and Cape Lookout, those are the two. Pamlico Sound is the top area where we get most of the cold stuns. So Lookout and Hatteras tend to get the most of those. But we send volunteers out patrolling on the shoreline, looking for those when the conditions are right, and then trying to rescue them and getting them to the different rehabs in the state. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of get involved with that project as well. Now, I will say you may have heard of a number of different sea turtle organizations up and down the state. And the way that we do this is that North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission works with all those different organizations. We provide the permits, and then they do a lot of the volunteer organization and structure. So really, to get involved with this program, we have people reach out to the different regional groups and apply to be volunteers with that. So it's kind of a twofer there. So they're volunteering with that local organization, and then that contributes to the North Carolina Sea Turtle Project. So we get those volunteer hours as well to help inform our management and also our monitoring of those species. Okay, so that's basically the background that I have of the different programs. I was calling it a little bit of a primer that I could show you some of the training materials that we've had, or we can just pause here and take questions. I don't know. What would you guys like to do next? I don't know how our time is. Just about half an hour there, so.
So you've watched this over a span of time. What's the most remarkable change you've seen?
Yeah, I actually have a microphone here where the person can actually hear, and I'd like for them to, the people on Zoom need to hear it also. So can you answer your question?
Ask again. Oh, I got it. Karen, you have a long period of time that you've been working on each of these programs, but what's the most remarkable piece of information or fact or change that you've seen?
Coastal development, right? So habitats, certainly are being changed, at a remarkable rate around here. So I just on the quick, I would say that was what I would see. On a personal experience, there was one day that I was out on the beach in Duck, and we were excavating one of our last nests of the season. So we were kind of putting an end to that, and which is always just kind of a bittersweet kind of moment. And we all looked up, and we saw a North Atlantic right whale. And, there's at that time, there were fewer than 400. We're now back to fewer than, or just over 300 in the estimated population. But yeah, so that moment on the beach, so there we were with the turtles saying the season's done. And this right whale, I knew right away from looking at it, I'm like, this is not behaving like our normal sightings that we see from the beach. And then it breached. And it breached again, which gave you even more, that body shape is so distinctive. So that's when I think of kind of my personal moments, that'll stick with me forever. Yeah.
Some other question over here. Oh, before, if anybody is on Zoom and wants to ask a question, please put it in the chat and we will try and get to it. Thank you.
You had mentioned bat houses. I assume I can Google how to build one, but about how long does it take to establish a bat house?
It could be a couple. It definitely, you want at least 2 years of kind of thinking before you would see something. And bat international conservation is the one to look for. They've got great plans on it. And the different requirements for mounting them, and the chambers too. You want to have multi-chambers.
Is there a guano industry in there? Is there a guano?
Is there a
Guano.
one?
Bat poop.
Bat poop.
The guano. Oh my goodness. I heard a great talk about guano yesterday. So the tool of choice, here you go. The tool of choice by DOT is the Swifter, right? The dusters that you have. So actually the floor one with the big pad on it, they're putting like duct tape on it, and then they reach up under the bridges where they're hanging out, and they stick the guano to that, and they've been sending it to the lab for analysis that way. Mhm.
Can you tell us more about CASP, the coal amphibian survey project?
Sure. So that's a program that, again, it takes place basically in, there's 3 different sample windows, and you can participate for all or one, but basically January to mid-February, March to mid-April, and then May to mid-June are the 3 kind of sample windows. Now for that one, what you end up doing is that you learn the different frog calls. And I actually have, I promise, so I'm going to jump to that. I'll pass the sea turtle embryo pictures. Oh, this might, I don't know how well this will do for folks online. My apologies there. Because it probably is not set up with that. But does anybody have a frog call that you're familiar with and you know what it sounds like? Bullfrog, right?
They can get the audio from your HDMI.
Yeah. Is it set to share?
I know they've been able to get it because we had an echo from it last.
Oh, let's see. Okay, let me find bullfrog because that is probably the most common one that people have. Now, this is Casey's cheat sheet here that you're looking at. So the bullfrog is listed in here under unique, like it is its own category. I just have a short version of it on there. Let me. Okay, so as I was speaking to some of you guys earlier, I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old boy at home. So the bullfrog has now affectionately been called the Jedi frog because so mnemonics, right? That's a way to kind of like hear the sound, think of something. So the lightsaber frog is now what the bullfrog is called in my house. Up to that point, the mnemonic I had learned was jug of rum, that they would be like jug of rum. But as soon as lightsaber came in, that's all I can hear with that one. So, so these are basically a lot of the mnemonics that have helped me to learn the frogs. And so this is what I would do in a workshop, is that basically we would go through, some of these, and I have a lot that are kind of this like comb ratchet. And I'll play one so that you can kind of hear and think of it basically the tines of a comb, or sometimes like a mechanic's ratchet, or wood blocks is another mnemonic. That these all sort of remind me of some of these. So let me play the Brimleys. You can hear that kind of ratchety. And if you notice that a lot of these comb ratchet ones, chorus frog, chorus frog, chorus frog, chorus frog. So you see a family kind of group here. Although then, squirrel tree frog, I hear it ratchety in the or raspiness of it, but it definitely is different than the others. But here's like, so Brimleys, and then you change to, let me do one that you might have, like the southern chorus frog in this area. So you heard Brimleys, and there we go. Come on. So he's just a slower comb, right? So the pace has changed. Yeah. But a lot of times, if you can get them quiet, if you can get them into their, their groups, then a lot of times it's like, okay. So I've got the comb or the ratchet. So it's probably one of these chorus frogs. And then you can narrow it down just a lot of times, like geographically or time-wise, to figure out which one it's likely. And then you can a lot of times just get it down to 2 species that you're probably dealing with. And frankly, I travel with my frog sounds, and I'll listen. I'll be like, oh, okay, then I can compare them. I can cross compare at the time and be able to do to change that. So like trills, so toads are another one. Now, In this area, pretty much the southern toad is what you have, and this one's called like a trill. You hear a lot of other things in here too, but that long. Versus like the American toad, so they just have a little bit of a pitch difference. And up by me, we actually can have some of these guys, but it's not. So that's so those are like what toads would sound like. And so what you do is you practice these. And so in my sessions, I basically go through this list and I talk about some of the different types of frogs, and then also give you some resources that you can actually kind of filter your list to just include what might be geographically relevant to the area that you're in, so you know who your top hitters would be. Although frankly, right, that's one reason why we want people doing this. Our range maps might have a little bit of give or take to them, right? So so just bear in mind that you know, if you hear something that's similar but not quite what you think it might be, like look within the family and maybe we can find some that just have not been previously or thoroughly documented in the area, so that it's on the range map. So honkers is one of my other favorite groups, right? Let me this one, I'm sure you guys don't. In fact, I gotta turn that down. I don't know what this will do, but they tend to be notoriously loud, and you probably will recognize them. They're very coastal. You know this one? Yeah. How many of you have had like on your sliding glass doors or in your cars, the green? Yeah, that's who that is. That's the green tree frog. Yep, he's there. So I call him a honker. The barking tree frog is another honker. Now I think of like a bicycle horn or a clown bell with that, you know, is sort of. So you, and then there's the romantics, right? The screamers and the criers in the group. Like nothing says love like this. That's a Fowler's toad. Yeah, so there's just a bunch of different ones there. And then what we end up doing is that once I've introduced them, then I'll play something like this for folks. And like this one has like three different frogs that come in predominantly. There might be some others in the background, but does that sound like marbles clicking together to you? Yeah, so bullfrog, right? We hear the lightsaber in there. Good. Trick number. Do you hear this one? Do you hear a banjo string in here? Green frog is the banjo string. Yep. So, and then the other one that we were working on, I don't remember how I've got this set up. Come on. So, those were the different sounds on there. Those belong to a different slide for certain. Sorry about that. Oh, so here, because I didn't. Okay, here we go. Practice one. So what we were listening to. So we heard those marbles, those click, 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 click marbles. Those are actually cricket frogs. Okay. So, and they're really unique like that. Oops. So here we go. Let's see. So the marbles, and they are the southern cricket in this case. You can also have northern crickets, which sound kind of like the marbles, but faster. So think about shaking a spray paint can. And then the lightsaber, which we talked about being the bullfrog. And then the banjo string. Did you guys hear that one in there? That one is the green frog. So I'll play that one just one more time for you. Maybe. So cricket frogs. Okay, so you would record that. And then the bullfrog. And now the banjo. There's like a plucked banjo string.
So we have a question from someone online.
Great. I'll get the frogs to be quiet in just a minute. All right.
Yes, we have a question online. It's from Cleopatra. I just purchased my childhood home in Duffy Field. Since March, I have observed at least 10 to 12 species of birds, red-headed woodpeckers, partridge families, feeding in my yard. There are squirrels, rabbits, and a pond with families of turtles. A deer showed up in the backyard. Have ecosystems in my neighborhood been documented for preservation and care? I literally have a small jungle in my backyard. I do not want to destroy the habitat, but would like to clear out the 7 years of trash and unwanted growth that I have accumulated since my mom died. The city representative I have contacted suggested linking with the community college forestry program. You have suggestions?
So I would also say that within the Wildlife Resources Commission, we have something called the Green Growth Toolbox, and that tends to be more for neighborhoods and communities, but they may have some resources as well that she could look into.
I would like to, I loved going to Cold Springs, and Mike Campbell, who I know worked with the Wildlife Resources, he was just a wonderful person. And I wondered if the education, there would be more education things. I know COVID probably stopped some of them, but I was hoping that they would start again because they were wonderful. We had bird walks and education and reptiles, and he was just a wonderful educator. And I was hoping that it would continue.
Yeah, no, that's a very timely and excellent question, because yes, our education division is starting to come back out after the COVID experience here, and they're in the process of kind of restructuring how they go about some things. So just curious, how many of you, anybody else ever take one of Mike Campbell's workshops? He's fantastic, isn't he? Yeah. So he retired and he's enjoying that, and it's well deserved. But at this point in time, if there are any of those experiences that you have enjoyed in the past or that you would like to see offered in, your region, please do reach out to, to the North Carolina Wildlife, Education Division, and just let them know the value that those experiences were and what else you'd like to kind of see in this area, because they're kind of restructuring, and it's a good time to put in your voice on that.
I actually have two questions, one big one and one small one. About 5 years ago, living in River Bend at night, the roar of frogs, you could hardly hear yourself think. Now, if you go out, if you hear a frog, it's a special occasion. So I'm wondering, do you have an idea of how badly the frog population has been impacted?
Well, so what I can say is that's one reason why we have the CASP surveys, is to try to be able to have some abundance indexes, because actually when you make those observations, not only do you say the species, but you give it basically a 1, 2, or 3, as in how loud is it call. And so that helps us to have some long-term data. But what I will say is that everybody who did their routes this year and even just sat in their backyards, what did you guys hear? Silence, right? Yeah. What was a common thread for this summer?
No rain, drought.
No rain. It was dry. So on the short term, the romance was not in the air, right? So there was a lot less calling, because a lot of the different species will rely even on the, the vernal ponds, right? So the ephemeral ponds that kind of come and go. And so without those, they're just like, I'm not putting that effort into that. What does that have on the longer term, population? We've certainly still had some good years and some bad years. So I don't think that, that the single year is going to have a huge, hit to us yet. But certainly if it continues in that direction, I mean, I know that definitely I missed hearing the frogs this year, for sure.
My science comes out and my wildlife biology comes out. With your programs, you have these separate programs. Is there an umbrella framework of coordination, particularly with climate change and the impacts on the coastal ecology. It's such a fragile system. Are they trying to kind of integrate this and also say with water quality changes to try to get a big picture?
Sure. So our biologists sit on a lot of different committees with various scientists and researchers, including, people who deal with like water quality and just ecological systems, in general. And I think that it's definitely collaboration is important amongst, our biologists and kind of understanding those broader pictures. And I know that they contribute a lot of their monitoring data to different studies and taking a look. But I know that a number of committees that our biologists tend to sit on is related around some of the climate change, issues and the impact that could have, and also what kind of mitigation efforts can take place as well. So there's certainly a lot of manpower put into this topic.
With the identification of box turtles and sea turtles, do the patterns on their shells stay the same, but just get larger as they get older, so we can identify the same ones if they're returning in areas or not?
So box turtles, there are definitely some groups that have been trying to do photo identification of their shells so that their patterns do remain the same. With sea turtles, they pick up a lot of hitchhikers in life. And so they get a lot of freeloaders on their backs. And so to be able to kind of see patterns with them is not as easy. But definitely the box turtles, there have been some groups that have been trying to do identification based on photo ID of the patterns.
Would you comment again on the diversity of vegetation? So you say there's a lot of development happening along the coast, and if all of the development is relying on one particular source for their trees and bushes and grass, does that reduce the diversity that you're actually seeing, and does that end up impacting all those that you're counting?
Well, certainly there's a lot of movement into kind of natural, natural backyards, natural, even when you're doing some horticulture of bringing in kind of the natural species, because it does impact the balance of the diversity of species. So there's a lot of encouragement to bringing those in and bringing in your natural species so that we can continue to maintain our natural populations.
I don't know if this is a fair question, but you briefly mentioned banding of birds. Of the birds you ban, how many bands do you ever actually find again? Is that a good number?
That's an excellent question for Carmen. And I don't know if you guys have met her. So I don't know the numbers, and I'm certain that there is an estimate out there. And that's one of the parts of when we provide permits, when the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission provides permits for putting the bands out, the idea is that there is a specific research question that's coming back and we'll return those answers. So whenever people are applying to do those things, they need to have something that they're asking, and then bring back the the data to the group. But how many of you have ever found a bird with a band on it before? Oh, no? Okay. Few of you. So there's websites that you can go to and you enter the band number in there, and sometimes you'll get some information back about that. And I'm wondering if on that site they might have a general estimate of kind of return rates on that.
Also for migration.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And you'll do that a lot on the coastal birds. I know that the water birds that people are observing, the different kind of bands, they'll be able to put them in. Sometimes even color patterns will help with just identifying the group.
There's some box turtle survey projects in the area.
I'm sorry, any what?
Box turtle survey projects.
So I'll have to look up the box turtle connection one. So we have not, a lot of that work, our biologist up in the mountains has been involved with. And I know that I had a program up in my area. So in Corolla, we were running that. But when I was talking to our biologists, so I'm just starting to get involved with that program a little bit more intensely. It's mostly out of the the state parks. So checking in with some of the local state parks, but we could look that up too.
What are they doing in Hammocks Beach?
Sure. I would bet that they would be part of that. Yeah.
At Hammocks Beach, yeah.
The sea turtles, how long can they hold their breath underwater?
Depends on how active they're being. But hours, let's say certainly hours. And if they're really inactive and like this cold stun type of thing, we talk about, like they may have like a heartbeat every 5 minutes, right? Like they can really reduce their rates. Of course, that's not too healthy for them. But.
In answering to his question, about 10 years ago, I came across a sea turtle that was tangled up in monofilament on the bottom, and we thought it was dead.
Mm.
And we know we're supposed to leave them alone.
Mm-hmm.
And then its eye opened. We had no idea how long it had been there, but we went and snipped away with our shears to get it loose.
Mm-hmm.
The sharks were not happy. They were waiting for it to become the buffet. But we have no idea how long she'd been tangled up. But as soon as she was free, off.
Wow. That's a life story for you, right?
Any other questions? Well, if there are no other questions right now, thank you, Karen.
Yes, thank you
Yeah.
for having me.
This has been
I will say if there's, so if any of these programs were of interest, you could go to nc-wild.org and you can check on one of the, put your name and email address in the project. And when we have more information about that coming up, we'll send off emails about how to get involved with those. So, yep, it's www.nc-wild.org.
There's also don't you have a magazine?
Sure. Wildlife in North Carolina. Yeah, it's an excellent magazine, and we had a great edition that just came out recently.
And how do we get that?
So that you can go to ncwildlife.org and look up the wildlife in North Carolina. Thank you for the plug.
It's a good, I like it. It's a good magazine.
Yeah.
Thank you again. This has been great. I got to do some plugs here. I want to thank everybody who attended here and everybody who was on Zoom. The Carolina Nature Coalition is funded by your donations. We don't get any money from any other sources. So if you like our programs, please donate here. There's a donate box by the food. And also, you can also donate online. Thank you. I want to talk about the next thing that's going on for Carolina Nature Coalition. There's going to be a tour of water retention facilities and water garden coming up. I think it's November 17th, Saturday. Clay Barber, who presented this for us earlier this year, will be giving the tour. And so look for it on your website, and also you will get a few probably emails on it. So that's what's coming up next. So thank all of you and have a good evening.